Good morning, folks. Welcome to Watchman of the King channel. My name is Dan. This channel is designed to bring you news and events from around the globe through a biblical lens. Something I want to look at today, specifically, is going to be wars and rumors of wars, okay? I've stated in the past that this is one of Jesus predicted non-signs, okay? And I have an explanation behind this, and hopefully you guys can track with me and understand what I'm saying here. Okay, I'm not saying that it isn't an end time sign specifically, but Jesus talks to us and tells us we're not to be dismayed. So why am I even bringing this up? Well, let's think about this for a second. North Korea sending missiles and starting nuclear tests again. First time since 2017, okay? They're really ramping up. We've got China calling for basically some type of collaboration between the two. You know, that they should be getting along and working together, okay? And I understand that they're both communist countries. Of course, we've got China, who just came out and declared that Hong Kong is fully in its control and that Taiwan is next. Right? Xi Jinping came out recently and said that. We know that is a rumor of war. Okay, we've got the American sitting president at present claiming that Armageddon's at our doorstep, basically. And so the drum beats of war are even in our own country. We have obviously Russia and Ukraine, but it's expanded. Belarus is now on the borders of Ukraine. They have a treaty with Russia and Russian troops there, ready to come across at any moment. We've got threats, obviously, from Putin to the rest of the West. And I'm not just talking about Western Europe and the UK and that kind of thing. I'm also talking about, anything to do with NATO. He's got his threats there. He's also got threats against the United States. We've got Iran, obviously propping up all the enemies of Israel sitting right on their border. And we've talked about this in the past. The Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the Houthis. Now, they're not directly on the border, but they want at Israel. We've got these things all kind of percolating, all working together. So at the same time. And I want to go over a few Bible verses real quick, okay? And I'm going to do them in succession. And then I'm going to tell you why I believe the way I believe, okay? And you can disagree with me, and that is not an issue. We can absolutely disagree with each other. And then what we do is we admonish each other and we go back to the scripture and find out what God has to say, okay? So let's take a quick look here. And we want to take a look at Matthew 24. And I'm going to go Matthew, Mark, and Luke. All right. So in Matthew, during the Olivet Discourse, they came to him and they asked him, what's the signs of your coming and the end of the age, that kind of thing. Okay. And he said, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. Matthew 24:6, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Let's go over to Luke. And it's about the same thing. Teacher, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of these that are going to take place? Here he says, see that you're not led astray, for many will come in my name saying, I am he. And the time is at hand. Do not go after them. And when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified. For these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. Okay, so let's head over to Mark 13. And again, this is on the Mount of Olives. Some people want to, and I'm not sure yet where I sit on this. Some people say, and in fact, I agree somewhat with Chuck Missler, that he has separated Luke from harmonizing specifically with Mark and Matthew. And the reason why is because they call out private discussion between just a few apostles in Mark and Matthew. But in Luke, it sounds like he's one, not on the Mount of Olives when that discussion takes place, and that he's talking to more than just Peter and Andrew and John, the folks that ended up being on the Olivet Discourse. Anyway, that's a big study, guys. Dive into that. The Lord rewards those who seek him diligently and look into his word. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm over here now in Mark, and he again, see that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name saying, I am he, and they will lead many astray. So obviously the first thing he tells us to do is don't be deceived and don't be led astray. All right? And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Before it was terrified, dismayed. Basically, don't be scared, because they must take place, but the end is not yet. All right. So why do I call that a non-sign? The reason why I talk about wars and rumors of wars as not necessarily a non-sign, but we got to remember, we had 2 world wars prior to Israel even coming back into its land as a nation. Okay? The First and Second World War both happened prior to Israel declaring itself a nation in 1948. Okay? In fact, it was the result of World War II on why they were given Israel back. They were given the land back. Now, of course, they called it Palestine at the time. And they, in one day, showed up and declared it to be Israel. They could have called it Judah. They could have called it anything else. They chose to call it Israel. And all of the Bible prophecy folks sat up, took notice, and had to understand that there was no more allegorizing the name of Israel in Bible prophecy. All right. So back to the wars and rumors of wars. If this in and of itself, and I believe this is why Jesus said this way, and I could be completely wrong. If it in and of itself was the only sign that people were looking at, and that's what he's basically saying, be careful. Don't look at this as a sign, because these things are going to happen. They're going to take place. So we need to see these, because he calls them birth pains. We need to see how they escalate. We also didn't have nuclear capabilities until near the end of World War II. Okay? So think about that, folks. We didn't have Israel, and we didn't have a way to absolutely mass wipe out the world and all flesh. So there is a today in Nearing Midnight, Terry James has a really good article that he discusses this just near the end of his article. It's just a small snippet. I'm going to read it to you. And he says the prophetic implications, right? All right. So prophecy part of the computation, and go read this article. You know what? I'm going to link it below. Nearing midnight, every believer, every watchman should be looking at Rapture Ready and Nearing Midnight every week. It comes out once every Monday. Okay, so there are a few things y'all should be doing. Nearing Midnight every Monday. Jan Markell every Friday and her podcast. Brett Metter the first Friday of every month. He does his prophecy update. JD Frog every Sunday has his prophecy update. Because of the algorithms and everything from YouTube, you got to start going over to his website because he splits them. He'll start on YouTube, but he goes over to his website because, tell you what, there's censorship going on. So, back to Terry James real quick. We've got, he talks about thermonuclear war that decimates the world is not scheduled this side of the church age, of the rapture of the church, all right? He doesn't think, and he doesn't believe, and I'm along the same lines, he doesn't believe that nuclear war is described in the Bible on this side of the bride going home. Now, I believe that nuclear war absolutely has to do with the red horse. I believe that is a worldwide issue. The sword comes against the world, and we see that being the problem. We also see, the black horse with hyperinflation and then disease and famine as the chloros horse, okay? But I wanted to bring up the fact, and I wanted to clarify, because I know I've said in the past that wars and rumors of wars are not necessarily a end time sign. And that's the reason why, is because Jesus himself, in these passages that I just read to you, he says, do not be dismayed, do not be terrified, do not be afraid. They are the ones that you don't go and putting such a heavy emphasis on that particular sign. He says these are the beginning of birth pains, for nation will rise against nation. Now that in the Greek is ethnos. Okay, it's the same thing we get ethnicity from. All right, so there will be racial tension that we're seeing on a level that we've never seen. I mean, we were doing really well with civil rights, and we were doing really well with breaking down racial barriers, and then all of a sudden, what happened in 2020? Okay, I'm telling you folks, I think 2020 was the midnight cry. I think that is when, not just what happened with what we were seeing with the pandemic, but what also occurred in the breakdown and lawlessness, utter lawlessness, and where it began in my home state. I no longer live there. I'm not up there anymore, and I definitely probably won't go visit anymore. But it started in Minnesota with the George Floyd thing. And you saw this extreme and immediate reaction. And racial strife began. But it didn't stay. Did you notice it didn't stay localized? First it swept this nation. But then pretty soon you were hearing that news about it being over in Europe. And racial tension in Europe. Now we're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism again. So that is a major sign to me. And again, birth pains. He likens these things to birth pains. And what do we know about a woman giving birth? Okay? If you've never been around one, or if you're not a parent, You've seen them in movies, and sometimes they kind of overemphasize the screaming and the pain and that kind of thing. We've done really well in science to give epidurals and that kind of thing. I'm not diminishing pain at all, not at all. Okay, I understand it is a painful process. Okay, my third child, the epidural fell out, so it wasn't being administered, and my wife went through a massive amount of pain because our son was a pretty big kid, 8 pounds, you know. So that I didn't mean to get off on that. What I'm literally trying to say there, though, is when it begins, when the water breaks, when the first contractions hit, they're a obvious, dull kind of uncomfortability. But then you watch the woman start to go through increasing intensity of what those contractions are. And here it is, the body getting ready to birth the child, right? So the cervix has to open up completely. It's got to be able to get to the point where that child can come down through the birth canal. And it's not a normal thing. It's not a normal state that occurs in a woman. So it's a painful process. And it happens slowly at first. And then they're able, and that's why you see in movies, or if you have children of your own, you've understood the timing of, you pay attention to how long the contraction lasts and then how many minutes in between. All right. And then as you see that shrink, as it goes smaller and smaller and smaller to get closer to the birth, they get more intense. That is what we're looking at. We're looking at the intensity of things. He did bring up famines. He brought up earthquakes. Now, earthquakes have dropped off of most people's radars. We've seen earthquakes all over the place and this and that. Well, go back and take a look at some of the USGS stuff. And from the time we started measuring to now, and look at the ramp up of how earthquakes are increasing, both in intensity and in frequency. All right. There's multiple things out there that are converging, and that to me is the biggest sign. You'll hear folks like Lee Brainerd and other people who will bring up the convergence of signs as the biggest sign in and of itself. The fact that all of these are funneling down and showing us that we are on the cusp. We're right at the edge of tribulation. So what does that mean for you and me as believers? As believers, being this close to tribulation, that means that the rapture is a breath away. And what have I been doing over and over and over again on this channel lately? I've been talking about being ready because he calls us to do so. He says, who then is the faithful and wise servant? Okay, who is waiting for his master, who stayed awake. He tells us to stay awake. He tells us to be sober. These types of things. And then he talks about, oh, what if you think it's delayed? So let's say there's a scoffer that comes amongst your midst. And they're like, oh, you know what? All these things have been since time first began. We've always had wars. We've always had earthquakes. We've always had weather. We've always had strife between people. We've always had anger and hatred. We've always had this kind of stuff. Well, the Intensity 1 should tell you right then and there that we're ready to go. The fact that it's just not calming down anymore. How about the fact that the most recent issue that plagued this globe, and it hasn't gone away yet. I hear new fear mongering around a new, want to be cryptic, but I don't even know. The fear mongering around the new sub variation of this anyway. I'm telling you folks, people are getting wiped off of YouTube for saying certain things. So now I don't have a big enough following. I don't have enough subscribers but I don't want to start getting dings against me that start threatening to take me off, because someone out there needs to hear this information. So there's fear mongering already saying we've got the worst thing coming. And it just popped up its ugly head in Asia in 2 locations. And they're saying that it is completely resistant. But then further down in the article, it talks about the newest and best Pfizer and other types of snake bites that are ready to go, and they actually this time are working. One, I don't necessarily buy it, and keeping the fear going. But what was I even talking about? I'm trying to point to the fact that the whole globe, every country, every nation on the planet Earth marched to the same drummer. There was no getting away from this particular thing. It wasn't pockets of it. It wasn't over there. It wasn't over here. It was worldwide. Okay, well, then we saw things go worldwide again after that. Like I mentioned, what started in Minnesota swept the globe and became a battle cry between races. Now we've got climate stuff ramping up, and that's a global thing that they're wanting to push on people. We've got abortion, that because of the Roe versus Wade thing, we found that to be a win. If you're a believer, that was a win in our direction. Yet what has it caused? Look at what it's caused. We've seen an extreme ramp up of where things kind of were left to just be where they were. Now it's pretty consistent. You got Prop 1 over in California that has pushed forward, and they're looking to, you're almost talking about infanticide there in some of the descriptions of not being able to prosecute a mother who takes the life after, it's called perinatal. It's after the birth up to a very particular number of weeks or days. Okay? And that type of language is scary. Had it been left alone, I wonder if we wouldn't have this new ramp up that is really demonic in what may start in some of the larger states, the bluer states, and then start sweeping across. Could this spark a civil war? I don't know. Now I'm thinking from an American perspective, and we gotta not look at Bible prophecy from an American perspective. We always have to keep our eyes on God's property, on his piece of land, and that is going to be Israel. Okay. Also, I've said in the past, don't make the mistake. Israel, their people, they came together again in unbelief. They're a very secular nation. I mean, sure, you see thousands of people gathering at the Western Wall, and thousands of people gathering to do the feasts of Israel and all that kind of stuff. But they're still a very unbelieving nation, very secular. Okay, and God's not going to do it for their sake. He's not doing it for their sake. He is doing it for his name's sake. He's doing it because he made a covenant. And that piece of real estate is his. So we have to pay attention to how everything ties into what they have going on. How does our exportation, right? How does our exportation of the alphabet soup, homosexuality, LGBT thing, and all of the, how we're mutilating children, all that, how is that affecting them over there? Well, just go look at their pride stuff. Go look at their inroads to their support for the same thing. Okay? Again, worldwide signs, folks, worldwide signs, not just pockets, not, how this is spreading everywhere. Lawlessness is not, by the way, just a breaking of the law, but it's a twisting of the law, and things that used to be moral and things that used to be right are no longer right and moral. Now we're being called bigots, and we're being labeled as hateful because we're standing up for Bible prophecy or just for God's word. So that's where I've been led to today, folks. I'm going to keep this one shorter, and I hope you all have a good day. God bless you. I hope to see you in the air, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.